Welcome to the Classic Movie Gush, number 15, and that's a big number, so we're going to do a big movie. Melissa Tagg and Clay Morgan here doing what we love to do, which is gush about classic movies. And tonight we're talking about probably the quintessential classic Hollywood film. If there is a movie that represents the old look and feel and style of Hollywood, you can't do much better than Casablanca, which is a great film. I almost feel like we should be filming this in black and white and smoking cigarettes and something like that. Casablanca is one of those movies that everybody has heard of, and then a lot of people feel like, well, I guess I should get around to watching it someday because they just haven't yet. And unlike Citizen Kane, which we talked about that film, it's not one that a lot of people want to watch over and over again. I think Casablanca, it really does get better. And there's a lot of things, like in any great movie, that will resonate more after you've seen it. For example, the first time Rick and Ilsa see each other. You don't really understand the meaning of that the first time you watch it, but it's still just so good. So you want to do a quick breakdown on the plot here of Casablanca? How do you feel about that?
I will attempt. I will attempt to do this. I might need a little help.
Okay.
So Casablanca takes place in Casablanca, and
Which
it is
is in
the story
French.
of Rick, played.
It's in French Morocco.
Yes. Once I went to the Rock of Gibraltar, and I saw Morocco in the distance. It was kind of cool.
Neat.
Anyway, this is the story of Rick, who is played by Humphrey Bogart, and he owns a, what is it, like a drinking hall or something?
Yeah, it's a
cafe,
like secret gambling in the back.
The bar, casino, yeah.
The Cafe American.
And yes, and he is just a jaded guy, and you can tell from the very beginning of the movie he's got hurt in his past, and his big line in the beginning is that he doesn't stick his neck out for anybody.
He doesn't.
So he does not. And so in the beginning of the movie, Rick comes into possession of these letters of transport that can get people out of Morocco. Morocco is it's a French province, or Casablanca is, and a lot of refugees come there to try to get out of France and out of Europe, basically. He comes into possession of papers that would let somebody get out and get to America or get wherever they want to go. And so there's a refugee named Victor Laszlo that shows up, and the Germans want him and they want to capture him. He's been in a concentration camp. He shows up at Rick's, and who should he have with him but Ilsa, who is played by Ingrid Bergman. And as soon as you see Ilsa and Rick together, you know that they have a past. And basically the story then is the story of Ilsa and Victor trying to get out of the country, trying to get these letters of transport from Humphrey Bogart's character, and then you get to find out what Humphrey Bogart and Ingrid Bergman's past is, and then the big question becomes, will Humphrey Bogart help her get out of the country, or will he not? You know, will Victor get caught?
It can be a little confusing. So here's the quick history lesson.
History lesson.
Like in 10 to 15 seconds.
Okay.
Between 1940 and 1944, when the Allies took back control of France, the French leadership, well, those that had not fled, there was a group of government leaders that agreed to kind of work with the Germans. So they wanted to try to keep some of their autonomy, and this was called the Vichy government, Vichy France. So a lot of those leaders did some things that weren't too good. Many of them were eventually punished or even executed for working with the Germans in that time. But that's kind of the world here, and it was a chance for people who made it to Casablanca. They were trying to get to the United States, and the movie is set in early December 1941. And if you know your history, it's right before Pearl Harbor is bombed by the Japanese. So the Casablanca was made in 1942, but that's kind of the setting. You did a great job on the story, though, and I forget who said it. The plot, it almost doesn't even matter, the plot, because it's really about this relationship and what will happen in the end. Who will get on the plane? And the cool thing is, Ingrid Bergman filmed this entire movie, and she didn't know. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, she didn't know which guy she would end up with, so she kind of played it both ways all the way through the movie, which
Yeah,
is great for the viewer, really, because you really, I mean, the first time you watch this, you honestly don't know what is going to happen. A lot of times, if you watch a romantic movie, it's pretty obvious from the first 5 minutes who's going to end up with who. So
right.
this one, the first time you watch it, you really are kind of like, hmm.
Yeah. The first thing you hear about Casablanca is that when they made it, the studios were pumping out 50 films a year. This was just another one of the movies along the
Mm-hmm.
run. And people, frankly, were kind of surprised that this one broke out. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
we've had the last whatever 70 years to figure out what's so great about it. But they put it together. They got the right cast, and Ingrid Bergman was still young. The director is a guy named
Mm-hmm.
Michael Curtiz. He was a well-known director. It would win 3 Academy Awards. I know. What did it win? Best Original Screenplay. I forget. I wrote it down. Best Picture,
And
Best
I think
Director.
it was nominated for like 8, I think.
Yeah.
It was nominated for quite a few.
Other people in the cast. You
So,
mentioned that he gets the letters of transport or whatever they were called from Ugarte, which is Peter Lorre, who we just met
yeah,
in Arsenic and Old Lace.
yeah, I like his
He,
character.
there's a lot of. It's
He,
interesting because there's a lot of slippery characters in this story.
hmm Yeah, yeah. You find out right away that Peter Lorre's character has probably killed somebody to get these letters of transport, and yet you still like him because he's fun and nice. But here's what I like about the beginning, and what I like about because his part of the storyline is actually really small. He's just there basically to get these letters of transport into the plot. And I mean, he's gone within the first, probably fourth of the film.
Hmm.
Um, but I love what it shows when he comes to Humphrey Bogart's character and he asks Humphrey Bogart to hold on to these letters of transport for him. Humphrey Bogart's character agrees to do this, but he doesn't really agree to help him all that much. And you kind of get to see this character who, yeah, he's got a nice heart and he's willing to do something nice for the guy, but he actually has a chance to help him a little bit later when German soldiers are coming after him. And that's when he's like, no, he doesn't do anything for the guy, lets the guy get caught. And it just gives a clear picture of who Humphrey Bogart's character is. Like, there's a nice guy in there, but he's not going to take any chances for anybody else, really. Not in the beginning of the movie. And it sets him up for kind of his emotional journey as a character. I really like that about the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, for sure, and I'm glad you brought that up. Louis Renault, the captain, the French captain, says right off the bat, Rick is completely neutral about everything.
Hmm.
And he does have that cold, hard exterior. It's all about money. But they also start to drop some subtle hints that when Rick did have a chance to get involved in a couple fights, he seemed to have joined the side of what was right, even for less money. They plant the
Right.
seed. And jumping ahead
Yeah.
a little bit, there's a really great moment to kind of juxtapose against how he lets Ugarte just go down so easily. When a
Hmm.
young girl comes in to the cafe desperate because, let's face it, the captain, Louis Renault, played by your guy, Claude Rains,
Cloud Rains, yep.
and he's brilliant in this movie.
Hmm.
He is a corrupt official. And
Yeah.
one of the things that he apparently does is he exchanges, he lets people's visas go through in exchange for some dalliances or whatever he holds over the
Nice way of
heads
putting that.
of some young ladies. And one of these ladies comes in and says to Rick, "We're really desperate, and
Hmm.
my husband, I don't want him to know. I'm willing to do this. I'm willing to have sex with the
Hmm.
captain, but tell me, will he really honor that shady deal?" And Rick says, "Yeah, sure." But then they twist it,
Hmm.
and it's really one of my favorite scenes. I'm sure it's one of everybody's favorite
Yeah.
scenes. Rick finds a way to get to the gambling table to make sure that they're newlyweds, right? They're young kids,
Hmm.
to make sure that her young husband wins and all of a sudden has the money
Yeah.
to go without having to be
That's a
involved in
great
that.
part of the movie. Yeah, a lot of people talk about Casablanca, and all they talk about is the romantic storyline, which is really great. It really is one of the top romances ever. But I love watching Humphrey Bogart's character Rick change through the whole
Mm.
movie. It's so true. He starts out, he's jaded, he won't help Peter Lorre, and then you see these little moments where yes, with this young couple, he helps them get the money so that they can get out of the country, and just little bit by little bit. And it's so cool because right after he does that, everybody's so happy because Rick did something nice. And he just breaks a little bit more and a little bit more through the movie until the end when he's willing to make a huge sacrifice, and is willing to start fighting for the underdog again. And to me, that's like the thing that I love most about this movie is watching his character change. It's a great story in that way.
For sure, there's a line somewhere near the end where Claude Rains' character says something about the line between love and virtue, and I've heard people say that that's what this movie's about. Will you choose love or will you choose virtue? And
Hmm.
and this Victor Laszlo, he is a real threat to the German cause, and I think
Hmm.
that's another reason why this movie increased in impact as time went on, as time goes by, but more and more, like as it became apparent throughout history how evil the Nazi regime was, that then
Hmm.
he's really this like everyman down and out guy who ends up being able to stand up, change, and like literally combat the most terrifying evil regime in history, at least in modern history. So the historical impact is not to be missed. And that Victor Laszlo guy, played by, as you said, Paul Unreed, he plays a pretty
Hmm.
great part as well.
Hmm.
I like the scene with
Yeah.
the singing.
Yeah, that's a great scene where yeah, the Germans in Rick's place start singing some German song. I don't know what they're singing. And yeah, Paul Henry's character goes down onto the floor and he tells the orchestra to start playing a French theme, and so the two sides are basically singing against each other. But that's a fun scene because not only do you have him leading this song, but you kind of get to see each little character um, start to join in, and you get to see
Yeah.
Ilsa looking at Victor, and you realize, well, she loves this guy too. She is a torn character.
Yeah.
Um, I read somewhere that when they had done a lot of the filming for the movie, they had Humphrey Bogart come back into the studio into Rick's and do a nod, and he didn't know where in the movie that was going to be or what it was even for, but the nod was telling the orchestra, yes, it's okay to play the French song. That's kind of fun.
That's another one of those legendary stories. They had characters filming reaction shots and they didn't even know what they were reacting
Yeah,
to. Just another sign that, like,
yeah,
why would this movie ever be special? They figured they were just
yeah,
doing another picture.
right.
One of the amazing things, really powerful about that scene when they're all singing, what is it called, La Marseillaise, the French patriotic song, and they're kind of like it's kind of like dueling national anthems. The Germans are trying to sing their music, and the French resistance or the patriots are
Right.
singing theirs. I guess when they were making the film, they had found actors who could play these European roles, and many of them did come from Europe, and in real life, many of them
Mhm.
had fled from Germany. So it was very
Mhm.
emotional, and many of the actors were actually really feeling that and crying because they were away from their homeland. They had been
Right.
forced to flee in the 1930s from the oncoming rise of
Yeah.
Hitler. So when I learned that about that scene, it gave it a whole new meaning. Pretty
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And it's a real fun set. I mean, to look at, you've got Moroccans and French people, and then you've got military personnel, you've got Germans. There's just so many different costumes and so many different actors. We haven't really even talked about just the amazing acting
Mhm.
between Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart. Do you have a particular scene that you really like besides the ones we already mentioned?
Besides the ones we already mentioned. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I like the scene where Ilsa comes back to there's a scene where Ilsa and Rick see each other right when she's first come to the place. That's fine if they have a little encounter. That's it. Well, then later that night, Ilsa comes back to Rick's, and um, they have an exchange, and it's not like one of the best parts of the movie, but it's so short and clipped, and the way they talk to each other, I really like that scene. I love the different scenes where they play as time goes by. But probably my favorite scene in the whole movie is the ending. I love the ending, and I don't know if we should say exactly what happens or if we shouldn't.
Let's
But
let's not.
okay.
Let's not, because that's one of the real amazing things about this film is if somebody hasn't watched Casablanca, and you totally should,
Yeah.
you really, like, even as we're talking about it, we could tell you to try to guess all you want, but it's really hard to guess
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
What? Yeah.
Um, so we'll leave it because we want people to want to watch movies because we're talking about them, and this would be a good one to not know what
Not
happens.
spoil the ending for
Just
you.
like Ingrid Bergman. But you're right, the ending is so iconic. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
It's the kind of movie where like you watch it and all of a sudden you realize you've heard like 20 lines from this film your whole life because there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
And you mentioned As Time Goes By, which we kind of talked about with What's Up, Doc last week, but that song was so tied into the entire score. It's really cool how that's a real huge part of the story. That song that connected these two characters in time.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. And of course, there's the line that everybody thinks is in the movie, which is "Play it again, Sam," which is never actually said in the movie. But yeah, Ilsa comes in and she sees Sam right away, who is the guy who plays the piano, and
Julie Wilson.
yeah, and asks him to play As Time Goes By. And then Rick comes in and gets mad that it's being played, but neither one of them ever actually says, "Play it again, Sam."
Well, later on at night when he's drinking and the place is quiet, Sam's trying to get him out of there. Like, come on, we'll just drive up the coast. We'll get out of here. And he says, you played it for her, you can play it for me.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to tell you about, and you'll appreciate this because I know you think about the way writing works and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Robert McKee, the legendary teacher of screenwriting, he's been doing his seminars in Hollywood for years. The movie adaptation has a lot to do with him. In the book of his I read, I forget which one it was, like the main one on movie structure, one of his go-to all-time classic scenes he uses to teach screenwriting is from Casablanca.
Nice.
And it's the scene where actually Rick and Ilsa come together in the market. And she's kind of looking at some materials, and the vendor's bartering and saying, like, here's how much it cost. Oh, you're a friend of Rick's, then it's this much.
Yeah.
It was really fascinating this is the first time I had watched that scene since I had heard Robert McKee's breakdown of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're into story structure and the writing and crafting, there's some good stuff here, and that's why, rightfully so, the people who wrote the film, Julius and Philip Epstein and Howard Cohn, won for Best Original Screenplay. They did a great job crafting a story here.
Mm-hmm.
And they had an all-time dream situation. I learned this, I forget who was talking about it, someone on TCM once. When the movie was getting set to release, it was weird how world events played a part. Because at the same time, so North Africa was the first theater of battle, really where the Americans were, and the Allied forces had to take care of North Africa first, which is affecting Morocco. So it gets liberated, and in a show of victory and strength, the Allied leaders, Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt, the American president, were going to go to Morocco and have a special conference, and the conference was held in Casablanca. So it took about like 0.3 seconds for the marketing PR department to realize the word Casablanca was about to be all over the front page of every paper in the world. And hard to imagine better promotion. So the movie played in New York City in 1942, and then it was generally released like right around the end of that year, or something like that. And the conference was held with these world leaders in January of 1943. So interesting how world events played a part in this classic movie.
That's funny.
Yay for history facts.
That worked out well for them. Yay. That worked out well for them.
So I was thinking about this as we wrap up. How many movies do you really remember exactly where you were the first time you saw it? And this isn't just about Casablanca. I happen to remember the very first time I saw it. I remember What's Up, Doc, the first time I saw it.
Yeah,
and with Citizen Kane, I remember about the first time I saw it, but I don't remember so many specifics. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, as I had such strong memories for Casablanca, I think that's kind of a personal barometer about how movies impact you. Um,
Mhm.
Obviously, if you see 1,000 movies in the theater, it's harder to sort them out. So Casablanca for me is one of those ones that I'll never forget the first time I watched it, and it gets better. It's like a good music album. Like the more you
Mhm.
hear, the more you listen, the more you catch. That's why I like this film so
Mhm.
much.
Yeah, I think too, a lot of times the first time you see it, you have an emotional reaction maybe to the kind of the basic story, just kind of focused on Rick and Ilsa's characters. But then the more you watch it, the more you catch on to these other side things that are going on. Like
Yeah,
Claude Rains' character, he has a whole story, and he changes by the end too, and
yeah.
becomes a guy that you kind of love by the end, despite all his kind of sleazy stuff earlier. Um, and yeah, he just has some really cool moments in the movie as well. So I think that's another reason that it's an enduring movie is that each time you watch it, you kind of get to see some of these side stories going on as well.
Absolutely. There's a great bartender named Sasha, and there's a couple of other ladies. There's a um, you just have to watch it. There's too many characters to go
Yeah.
through. The maitre d is a great. He's fun. There's a pickpocket.
Yeah.
By
Oh
the way,
yeah.
that pickpocket, I forget his name, but he is one of the longest running actors in Hollywood. He was in the pictures
Really?
from 1907 to 1987. His career spanned 80 years acting.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I don't even know his
Good long
name. So
career.
bad on me. But Casablanca, a great film. We try to hit the bigger ones when we get to these every 5 gushes or so.
Mhm.
So check out Casablanca. I'm guessing there's some people out there who have already seen it. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on it. Are we gushing too much on this one, or do you agree that it's one of the top movies of all time? Is it the greatest Hollywood love story of all time? Ooh.
Good question.
All right, so that's classic movie gush number 15. We'll see you next time.